All right, Shalom. This is the brother Nahalia from the GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rukakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Now, as you can see before you, this is an article. A few brothers have done a lesson on it, but I, through the Spirit, wanted to go into it as well. And this is entitled The Slaves Dread New Year's Day the Worst, the Grim History of January 1st. All right. And this picture is a illustration from 1830 of a slave auction. All right. And I'll start reading on the article. All right. And it reads, Americans are likely to think of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day as a time to celebrate the fresh start that New Year's represents. But there is also a troubling side to the holiday's history. In the years before the Civil War, the first day of the new year was often a heartbreaking one for enslaved people in the United States. In the African American community, New Year's Day used to be widely known as Hiring Day or Heartbreak Day. As the African American abolitionist journalist William Cooper Nell described it, because enslaved people spent New Year's Eve waiting, wondering if their owners were going to rent them out to someone else, thus potentially splitting up their families. The renting out of slave labor was a relatively common practice in the antebellum South and a profitable practice for white slave owners and hirers. Hiring Day was part of the larger economic cycle in which most debts were collected and settled on New Year's Day, says Alexis McCrossan, an expert on the history of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and a professor of history at Southern Methodist University who writes about Hiring Day in her forthcoming book, Time's Touchstone, The New Year in American Life. Continuing on, it reads, some enslaved people were put up for the auction that day or held under contracts that started in January. These transactions also took place all year long, and contracts could last for different amounts of time. These deals were conducted privately among families, friends, and business contacts, and slaves were handed over in town squares, on courthouse steps, and sometimes simply on the side of the road, according to Divided Mastery, Slave Hiring in the American South by Jonathan D. Martin. Accounts of the cruelty of Hiring Day come from records left by those who secured their freedom, who describe spending the day before January 1st, hoping and praying that their hirers would be humane and that their families could stay together. Of all days in the year, the slaves dread New Year's Day the worst of any, a slave named Lewis Clark said in 1842. In an 1842 account, Salakia, on New Year's Day, we went to the auctioneer's block to be hired to the highest bidder for 1 year. Israel Campbell wrote in a memoir published in 1861 in Philadelphia, in which he describes being hired out 3 times. That's where that saying comes from, that what you do on New Year's Day, you'll be doing all the rest of the year. A former slave known as Sister Harrison said in an interview in 1937. Harriet Jacobs wrote particularly detailed account in The Slave's New Year's Day chapter of her 1861 autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Hiring Day at the South takes place on the 1st of January. On the 2nd, the slaves are expected to go to their new masters, she wrote. She observed slave owners and farmers renting out their human chattel for extra income during the period between the cotton and corn harvest and the next planting season. From Christmas to New Year's Eve, many families would wait anxiously to find out whether they would be rented out and to whom. On New Year's Day, at the appointed hour, the grounds are thronged with men, women, and children waiting like criminals to hear their doom pronounced, Jacobs wrote. On one of these fateful days, Jacobs saw a mother lead 7 children to the auction block. She knew that some of them would be taken from her, but they took all. The slave trader who took the children wouldn't tell her where he was taking them because it depended on where he could get the highest price. Jacob says she would never forget the mother crying out, "Gone, all gone. Why don't God kill me?" Enslaved people who attempted to resist going to their new masters were whipped and thrown in jail until they relented and promised not to run away during the new arrangement. Older slaves were also particularly vulnerable, as Jacob describes one owner trying to hire out a frail, roughly 70-year-old woman because he was moving away. But the history of New Year's Day and American slavery is not all horror. The holiday was also associated with freedom. The federal ban on the transatlantic slave trade went into effect on New Year's Day in 1808, and African American communities did celebrate, but the festivities were short-lived. Different slave trade abolition commemorations took place between 1808 and 1831, but they died out because the domestic slave trade was so vigorous, says McCrossan. The risk of violence was also too great. For example, on New Year's Eve in 1827 in New York City, a white mob attacked African American congregants and vandalized their church. The holiday became associated with freedom. The holiday became more associated with freedom than slavery when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing slaves in Confederate states on New Year's Day in 1863. Slaves went to church to pray and sing on December 31st, 1862, and that's why there are still New Year's Eve prayer services at African American churches nationwide. At such watch night services, congregants continue to pray for more widespread racial equality 157 years later. All right, and that's the end of the article. I wanted to get all of this article because it shows you the different eras and how a lot of the customs that are kept today of our people are really a product of slavery. In particular, the watch night service. Speaking of, we're on so-called New Year's Eve right now, and many so-called black churches are filled with our people who really don't have an understanding of why they have watch night service, and this article touches on these things, and I really want to do this article really because it shows you how forgiving our people are, how forgetful they are, and ultimately how rebellious they are. Our people, when you really meditate on it, they really have more love for their oppressor than they do for their Heavenly Father. And the reason that I say that is because of this. So this is Ecclesiasticus, all right? And Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 15, and it reads, "That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and the Most High requireth that which is past." All right, because the Most High requires this, man. What has happened to our people, the Most High has required it, and he is going to avenge for what's been done to our people. And we're in a day and age, and it's ironic, that we're in a day and age where the Lord is starting to exact some of that revenge, and our people are forgetful of what has happened to our people, and quite content in the hands of those who have done so much harm to our nation. And that's the majority of our people. They have been given to this place, and they have been completely satisfied for the most part with being here. They have no desire to leave. They have no desire to see change or liberty or freedom in its actual and true sense. But the Most High requires that which is past. He requires the times where this mother in this article had to watch her 7 children, all be sold from her. The fact that she goes to an auctioning block hoping that, one of her, knowing that she's going to lose some children, all of that is a part of the curses. Matter of fact, I want to get that. I want to get that. Let's go to Deuteronomy. Because this also shows you that this is our people. All right. This is not another nation, but this nation, it is the nation of Israel consists of you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. All right. And this article proves it, because it goes back to the curses. All right. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. All right, because she asked if the people who sold or who bought her children, if they could tell her the location, where would they be taken to, and they couldn't tell her. They didn't tell her, and they couldn't tell her because they were trying to sell them to somebody else. Going into the 64th verse or 68th verse, I'm sorry. You would be sold for bondmen and bondwomen. All right. And there was no might in her hand. She didn't have the ability to resist all of her children being sold. Going back to the curses, and now we're at a time where we're on so-called New Year's Eve, and in times past where a mother would be losing all her children, you have that same nation of people in a club right now or at a church right now, and they have long forgotten the tribulation our people have suffered here. And it's not like it has improved to a point where you are on an equal footing with the nations that are around you. All right, you're still trimming your way to seek love and failing miserably. Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemel Shai, it's very spiritual that we're now in the time of the Lord's vengeance, man. We're in a time where the Lord is starting to upset the success of all the nations who have profited off of our downfall. The Lord is beginning to upset them. He's beginning to grieve the nations that have profited off of our destruction and who still profit off our destruction. In this article about New Year's Eve and New Year's Day is just another example of how these so-called holidays that our people celebrate are tainted. For you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, all of these holidays that you foolishly celebrate are tainted with tribulation, with mourning, really. And our people do everything that they can to forget the past and to be distracted from the present. But the Lord requires that which is past. As a matter of fact, let's get this. So this is Zechariah chapter 2 and verse 8, and it reads, For thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you, for he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. Because the popular conversation is that, tragic things have happened to all different nationalities of people and different nations of people. And this is true, but the problem is that you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, when you other nations touched us, you just happen to touch the nation that the Lord has chosen. You just happen to touch the nation that the Lord loves. And for that, recompense is at hand. All right. And that's through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemel Shai. All right. You touch the nation that the Lord has chosen, and there is nothing that you can do to rectify that except for receive judgment. All right. Matter of fact, let's go to this. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 9. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. He found him in a desert land, and in the waste howling wilderness. He led him about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. All right. So that's who the apple of the eye of the Lord is, all right? You Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, all right? And for that purpose, this present world, this present ruling class, ruling nation, this whole paradigm, this whole reality that we live in is going to be altered for the sake of the children of Israel, for the sake of the nation that is despised amongst all nations, to a point where they even despise themselves. But for their sake, the Lord is going to bring swift judgment, not only to America, not only to other Edomite nations, but all nations are really going to feel the brunt of judgment when the Most High begins to judge this world in a heavy way. Matter of fact, I want to go to this. I'm going to get the point on this one. Joel chapter 3 and verse 1. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered amongst the nations and parted my land. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they may drink. And New Year's Eve is just another highlight to that dark past of you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans who are the children of Israel. All right? But it is the Lord's determination to gather all these nations, that he may pour upon them his fury, his indignation, his righteous anger. As it reads in Zechariah, the 2nd chapter, when you touch the children of Israel, you touch the apple of the Lord's eye. And he held his tongue for a moment. But now is the time where the Lord's going to begin judging. And as this world is out here to celebrate and enjoy what they believe is a prosperous 2020, the Holy One of Israel has an entirely different plan for 2020, an entirely different agenda. And this world will find that out very soon. The Lord, the creator of all things, is going to bring judgment on this place and abroad. And it's for the sake of the past. The past that you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans try so hard to forget. The Lord is going to bring destruction for that purpose. As it reads in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, the Lord requires that which is past. So I just wanted to go into that, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. And again, man, as we move into this new year, the so-called new year, really the new year begins in spring. But as we move into their so-called new year, on their New Year's Eve, the Spirit of the Lord is going to begin to move in this place. Even bigger, than it did in 2019, as the Most High starts to bring more prophecies to pass and more judgments to pass. This world is going to recognize that the power of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, is real, all right, and it is present, and he governs and he rules in the realm of men. So I just wanted to do a lesson going into this, because our nation still suffers from the effects of these calamities, all right? These calamities that we've had in the past. And true justice is wanting to see judgment, man, not being paid off and none of these things. True justice is wanting to see the scales balanced, and that's what the Most High is going to do, all right? This is Psalms chapter 109, all right? Verse 6. Set thou a wicked man over him, and let Satan stand at his right hand. When he shall be judged, let him be condemned, and let his prayer become sin. All right? Let his days be few, and let another take his office. Let his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. Let his children be continually vagabonds and beg. Let them seek bread also out of their desolate places. Let the extortioner catch all that he hath, and let the stranger spoil his labor. Let there be none to extend mercy unto him, neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children. Let his posterity be cut off, and in the generation following, let their name be blotted out. Let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered with the Lord, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Let them be before the Lord continually, that he may cut off the memory of them from the earth, because that he remembered not to show mercy, but persecuted the poor and needy man, that he might even slay the broken in heart. As he loved cursing, so let it come unto him. As he delighted not in blessing, so let it be far from him. As he clothed himself with cursing, like as with his garment, so let it come into his bowels like water, and like oil into his bones. Let it be unto him as the garment which covereth him, and for a girdle wherewith he is girded continually. Let this be the reward of mine adversaries from Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, and of them that speak evil against my soul. All right. And with that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. The honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.